Welcome to the Outtake Show, the show where we give outlandish opinions within the movie and TV world. Got the host of the most, Yard Man Juniors, in the building. We also got my co-host in the building as well, the silent assassin Mazzavelli. It's been a long time since we're in a new space, but
Yeah.
we're
But
leveling up.
wait,
There's
more.
We do have a special guest in the building as well with us. We got writer, director, and producer. Someone with many hats. Many hats he's filling right here. Got Stefan in the building. How you doing, Stefan?
I'm doing great. I wear too many hats.
Yeah, my mum
Too
would
many
say
hats.
you're a jack of all trades.
Yeah, but you know the second part of that, master of none.
That's funny.
Yeah, that's also true.
Fair enough. Well, we got a lot of stuff to talk about. From between you, of course, selling a show to HBO, your feature debut appearing at Manchester Film Festival, and just talking about the industry in a whole, the difference between American and UK culture when it comes to working with talent. And we just spoken about the many hats you fill, so it's going to be a great conversation just to touch on these many different fields that you do. But we'd love to get like a little background about how did you get into this industry and where did it start from?
Yeah, I was like one of the kind of classic tales of like an 8-year-old. I stole my parents' camcorder and started making little videos.
Yeah.
And always knew that I wanted to do something creative. And then in college, like I'm from the Midwest, and in the United States, it's like this kind of common trope that people from the Midwest are like very pragmatic. They're like they're very like down to earth. They don't have like big dreams and aspirations. They kind of just keep to themselves a little bit. Anyways, so that got the better of me, that thinking, and I decided to major in advertising. I didn't study film because it didn't feel practical. And so I did advertising.
Yeah.
And that was great because then I was on set all the time. I was writing and directing commercials. And so I was just getting a lot of reps.
Nice.
But I always knew that someday I'd like to get back into film. And eventually just sort of rekindled that flame, I guess you could say, and started writing the first feature film. And that's sort of how I got into it, was vicariously through advertising.
Fair. Have you found...
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, did you find any like skills from marketing that you brought into filming?
I think so. I think that I mean, there's many that I could probably point to, but one of them that is like most advantageous, I would say, is just in the marketing of your films themselves. I think that a lot of artists, they hate the business side of it. They hate having to put on that cap and figure out, how do I promote something? How do I go about getting the eyes on my projects that I want? Because it is a slog, and it's not like the fun, sexy part of it. So that is something that I have a bit of a knack for, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And I'm not really shy or like afraid to go and start putting on like the marketing hat. And I think that with where indie film is going, there's just going to be a lot more need for that kind of thinking, of creative ways of getting your projects out there.
Yeah, nice. Same as you.
I was going to say that one of the things we're kind of noticing is this huge transition where people have gone from like advertising, commercials into like feature films. So we also have like Macau's with Wasteman. He started off in like music videos and advertising. And what was that transition like, going from something that's normally 5 minutes to a short, then a feature, and then you've got, of course, your like TV series?
Yeah. I to be fair, like, I actually think that I'm not particularly good at it yet. I think that that's like one of the places of my art that I would like to cultivate. I have a really good friend that when he saw my most recent film, One of Us, he kind of said that like, you're struggling with like pacing a little bit in the film. And I don't think that he's actually wrong. And I took that, he's a good friend, so he can roast me. That's okay. And he was right, that I think that it's a struggle, because the pacing of the commercials that I was making was just really different than how do you do that and how do you sustain interest and intrigue over an hour and a half to 2 hours. And I think that that's something that anybody that's coming from short form is going to have to learn, that skill, because it's just a different medium. It's like, I suspect, similar to going from painting something, you know, that's the size of a postcard to painting a mural.
Mm-hmm.
The scale isn't exact, and there are things that start to break down as you move up in scale. And I wouldn't even say that I'm particularly good at it yet, but I think that I'd like to be good at it.
I don't know. We kind of really liked One of Us,
Yeah.
and I liked it because it had that theatre aspect to
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
And someone who started off as from a theatre background, from the jump when it came to the language, the
Yeah.
way it was set up, it just felt like it was a play that
Yeah.
became a screenplay.
Yeah.
Was that intentional?
I think so. I think that like in like the Shakespearean sense that all the world is a stage. That was very much like what I was confronting at the time that I was writing it, was my sort of experience with the curtain falling down and waking up to my perception of reality maybe not quite being what was real, and recognizing like how performative we all are and how much of life is literally just putting on costumes and speaking in a language that is foreign to us because that's how we learned to do it. And so to me, there was this kind of awakening to that reality that Shakespeare talks about. And it felt so performative that it felt very natural for that story to exist in that language and in that kind of theatrical space. I'm not trained in writing for stage or anything like that. So it wasn't something that was, let's say, natural for me, except for that it felt very natural in like a human sense, that it's like, wait, I've been performing my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
I mean, there's so many people that argue that concept, even like sociologists, but it really translated so well in the feature.
No, that's really nice of you. I appreciate that. I'm glad that came across, because I obviously you guys are one of the early people to have seen the film. And so it remains a little bit ambiguous to me how people react to that. And really the only connotation that I have for how people are responding to it is the submitting to film festivals and hearing what programmers have to say about it. But in terms of public eyes and how they're going to respond to it, that hasn't happened yet. So I appreciate
Thank you.
your take.
If it wasn't mentioned before, One of Us will be premiering at Manchester Film Festival. Of course, it's got a stellar cast. Of course, it has British on. Is he British on?
Yeah.
Kit
Yeah.
O'Connor
Yeah.
in the building as the main lead. How was the process like getting someone like Kit O'Connor, especially it seems like from an early stage before, of course, he's popping up in a lot of stuff. I think he's known for Heartstoppers on
Heartstopper, I think
Netflix.
he did like when he was really young, Rocket Man.
Yeah, he's in Rocket
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
And he's done
Yeah.
some theatre stuff.
Yeah, he played
to date,
Romeo
yeah.
in Broadway.
Yeah.
But I believe that was after
That
you'd
was after
cast
the
us.
film.
Yeah.
That was after the
You think
film.
you'll
So you
The
really
taste of
got
it.
him exactly with the Shakespearean language in
Yeah.
time.
Right
we
after
got-
doing it, he was like, you know what, I kind of want to do theatre now.
I don't know. Well, it was funny because at one point he did message me and he was like, hey, can I show a screener of the film to somebody? And he didn't tell me who he was sharing it with. But then it was a few months later that he was cast in the Romeo project. I was like, I wonder if the director was, hey, can you do something in this world? And he's like, yeah, I can
Yes.
definitely do something in this world. And I don't know that. So maybe that's not a fair assessment. But
I mean, 2 + 2 is 4.
yeah, 2 + 2 is 4 a little bit. And he was great. I went and saw him on Broadway in New York with
Nice.
Rachel Ziegler, and they were fantastic. The two of them were really, really remarkable on stage, as you might imagine. But yeah, it was very kind of, as many of these things are, it was very lucky. We knew that we were going to come over and make the film in the UK, in part because of the language. I knew that I did not want to cast out of the United States. I didn't think that people would be classically trained enough in theater to do what I wanted to do with the project. And obviously, theater schools over here, it's like they're very immersed in that kind of language, so much experience with Shakespeare and with difficult texts like that. So I knew I wanted to cast out of the UK. And long story short, like eventually we were casting through Independent Talent Agency, which is a great talent agency here. And we had somebody else that was slotted to do it. And they called me like a few weeks in advance and they're like, they were really sick and I think they had pneumonia. And it was just something that it was like, I don't think we're going to be able to go in this time frame. We were like ready to film. And fortunately for me, I kind of had like a roster of people that I really wanted to get in the film, and reached out to Independent, who he was repped by, said, "Look, like we're scrambling here. We need to have somebody in." And Kit had been on my list from really early on. And I had mentioned to his talent agent, I said, I'm a little concerned that maybe he's too young to play the role. I had envisioned it maybe 5 years older. And she just said, he's the most mature guy you'll ever meet. Any concerns you have about that, just talk with him, and you will not have that fear. And that was true. Like one phone call with Kit, and it was like, he's the most well-spoken, respectful, wise person that you'll ever meet. And for his age, it was just like, okay, this kid really punches above his weight. And so we got very fortunate, and he stepped in and was memorizing a very difficult script.
Because he
in a
had
really
like
short amount of
a
time.
monologue heavy dialogue
Oh my gosh.
throughout.
It's so dialogue heavy. It was, I don't quite know how he did it. I certainly couldn't, but I have a terrible memory. But he was memorizing the next day's pages the day before. And I'm not joking. He would come and he would not miss a line. I'm not joking. I don't know how he did it.
Not even one line.
No, literally. And this isn't to knock anybody. It's very normal for somebody to like, flub a line or whatever. He was never lost. He was never like, wait, what's the line after that? Not once. He just had it down pat, literally from one night's worth of study. I mean, he had been obviously reading it many times, but it was truly a feat. And so my respect for him is just immense. I think that any success that he has had prior to that and is having since is completely warranted. He's truly a remarkable actor. So
yeah, this was like the first time seeing him in such a lead role where he's like essentially carrying the whole film. So
Yeah.
it was quite amazing seeing him in his performance. Like I actually found myself becoming a fan of him now because every time I've seen him, anything I've seen him in, it was mostly a supporting role. So see like he's very capable of like carrying such a brilliant performance in this way. It was quite amazing to see. You briefly spoke about like the talents and the UK talent casting agencies. I've been watching some of your previous interviews, and you have spoken about like the differences between the UK and America. We do have like a huge UK audience down here. So great to just get an understanding of like the differences you've seen within working within America and working in the UK.
So when we first started the production for One of Us, me and the producer were based in the United States. And so it made logical sense at the time to go through the US-based talent agencies for the UK actors, because many of them are obviously co-represented. They'll have a UK talent agent and a US one. And I mean, to put it bluntly, like we just could not get the time of day. And like obviously, like I wouldn't name names or anything. And in their defense, like I was a no-name actor or director. She was a no-name producer, but by and large, kind of remain so. But to not even like respond to emails, to just kind of ghost us when we're coming with like a very firm offer. We have the film is financed. Like this was not just like some indie project where we were like, hey, we'd be super curious if we could. We were like making offers and just getting ghosted. And I spoke with a casting director here in the UK, and she just told me, she said, the answer in LA is no until it's yes, and the answer in the UK is yes until it's no. And what she meant by that was, when you talk to a talent agent in the UK, their natural disposition is, let's make a movie. Let's work on something. That is I think that they are in alignment with their actors in that is what they want to do. They want to work. Now, after I have read the script, and when we've gotten into conversation about finances and scheduling and who else is acting and who else is slated to be in the film, if it's just not going to work out, then it's a no. But our natural disposition in the UK is always going to be, let's make a movie, or let's make a series, let's do this. And I think it's the exact opposite in LA. I think the answer is, I have too many emails to sift through as it is. If you're not somebody who is already acclaimed or presenting just an astronomical number, or the child of somebody who is acclaimed, then I'm just not going to have time for you. But if you are one of those things, well, then the answer is yes, let's talk. And so for that and many other reasons, coming and making the film in the UK just made total sense. And it was such a positive experience.
Yeah.
I know so many people from the States that are coming to make their films over here now. There's a better infrastructure for it. I think that there's a better attitude about the filmmaking. There's much less pessimism. And you're just getting, I mean, you guys have had people on the show, like you're just getting really cool films coming out of here.
Yeah, we do have. I think every day, even as like we're seeing on the streets, like something's being filmed.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
on the streets
all the
I
time.
keep bumping into like random set moments, like even around my local area when Pillion was being shot,
Yeah,
Yeah.
wow.
and that was just like really random. And I think it's becoming weird seeing this transition that Hollywood has this big hub, but the next big place is actually England.
It really feels that way. I talk to a lot of directors, casting directors, producers that are looking to make the move over here. And it certainly is, it's bolstered by, you have an infrastructure here with the BFI that really deserves shouting out, because I think that they really care about making work. And the United States just doesn't have that. We don't have the governmental agencies that care about the arts at all. And so there's no funding for it. There's no tax support for it. There's, amongst many, many other things, there's just not the institutional support. And so you're sort of left to your own, you're left on your own a little bit in the filmmaking process in the United States. And especially, I think, in Hollywood, it becomes very, very difficult to get something greenlit when you just don't have that kind of institutional support.
Yeah. We're here on our Outtake show. We really champion indie film, so it was great to hear about how you went about making One of Us, and of course it premiering in Manchester Film Festival. Just touching on, of course, I have watched some of your interviews. So yeah, and you mentioned talking about film festivals in general,
Yeah.
and like, how do you feel? Because I went to Berlin Film Festival this year, really enjoyed it. We went to London Film Festival last year as well, and we're now seeing like a wave of like films that essentially ain't indie being premiered and being showcased in these type of festivals, where essentially we kind of want to leave more room for indie films. I know you mentioned this in the past of like major films like going into film festivals. Do you want to just touch on like your experience of like having your film premiere with Manchester Film Festival, but it's like the whole scope of like how film festivals should be?
Yeah. Well, okay. I should put a huge caveat in that I'm hugely biased, because obviously I want everybody to love my film.
Yeah.
And everybody should program my film. And so like any jadedness, like I just want to make that disclaimer that it's like, I don't have, I try to just take a non-biased look at this. But I think when you look at the finances, because always I think you can follow the money and you can figure out a lot. After COVID, the film festivals across the world were crippled.
Yeah.
You cannot operate a business with all of a sudden 1 year not having any revenue.
Yeah, of course.
And so they are hobbling, and as is only natural, the directors and programmers of those festivals are looking for, how do we rebound? And in comes an industry that has been eroding at the box office, and in come streamers who are looking for a really, really valuable marketing platform prior to launching films on their streaming services.
Yeah.
And you have a match made in heaven. You have people that say, look, you're a failing, struggling festival, and what I bring are A-list celebrities and budgets, and we will host parties, and we will have workshops, and we will have panels, and we will fund all of these things that you need to get back on your feet. And the festivals say, well, what's the price? And the price is, like Sundance said a couple of years ago when I was there, only 60% of films in their programming came from submission. Meaning the other 40% are just coming from Netflix or from Paramount or from whoever, saying, hey, if you want XYZ people to come to your festival, which is what you're going to use to sell tickets, then you got to give us some slots. And so I think that what happens is there's a crunching down, where now you have a $70 million indie film because it wasn't produced by Paramount or Warner Brothers, but it was produced by A24 or Netflix or Apple, and it has a $70 million budget, and it has every known actor under the sun and a director who is very well established in all these things premiering at the Indie Film Festival. And it's like, yes, technically speaking, that is an independent film. But I don't think that the average person thinks that that's what they mean when they say independent. They think a group of people who like threw a bunch of money together and tried to get something greenlit.
Yeah, we definitely spoken about this in past
Yeah,
episodes for like...
we've had the debate of, is A24 still classed as an independent film company?
It's tough.
Yeah,
Tough.
because just last year alone they've been using... They had 2 big films with
Smashing Machine and Marty Supreme.
Yeah, over 50 million with big stars, big blockbuster stars essentially. So it's like, what does indie mean now if we're throwing these type of numbers in the waters?
And it maybe is semantics, but there probably needs to be a different term for what that is, or there needs to be a different term for what independent film is. Although I think that independent film has a longer history of being something that was outside of the studio, meant outside of money. It meant that you were making it through private equity that you were raising from family and friends and maybe governmental bodies and some art bursaries and whatever. That is what that meant for the last 70 years. And it's only recently that you're starting to arrive at a place where the streamers have completely disrupted the old model of Hollywood. And now you're getting into this gray area where there are independent producers, independent of Hollywood, that still have loads of money, that are run like private equity firms, that have the profits necessary to invest in huge productions. And good, that's great. I think that a lot of indie filmmakers aspire to get to that status. I think that if you couldn't find many independent filmmakers today who wouldn't love to get a phone call from A24.
Yeah.
So it's great. It's nice that there's a landing point, but it is still different probably than what most people think of when they say indie film, and that somebody is like, I'm taking my parents' camera and I'm going to go and make something with my friends in the backyard.
I think the word indie now is kind of used a lot of times for promotion now, to put that as a label to say we're still independent production, to get like us like film buffs to kind of like make sure we watch it first week, make sure it gets the numbers it is meant to get, because quote unquote is an indie film, when essentially they have like huge stars in the back of it. So it's like, it's very difficult to understand.
It's still cool and trendy and different, but it's not necessarily as edgy.
Yeah. And that is what the reason why I think that they have such a valuable role to play, that the companies like Neon or A24 is because they are broadening the taste palette of what's acceptable as a blockbuster film. And you get something like Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is somewhere in that gray area of like, it's kind of indie, but it's kind of not. But it has complete blockbuster appeal. It's just not a film that could have been made out of with most, traditional studios. And so for that reason, I think any artist should be somewhat grateful that they're broadening that taste palette. But to not get it twisted, that there still is another branch of independent cinema that is really trying to do something novel and avant-garde or interesting and fresh, and that maybe just doesn't have the blockbuster appeal yet. But that still exists. It still is very much out there.
Yeah. What do you see for yourself? Of course, making this indie film, and like, what do you see your I don't know if you still want to be working within the independent scope, or like branch out to like major films. I know directors like Sean Baker has been very open about like he doesn't want to work with major companies because he wants full creative control. I know obviously this is quite early days, but what do you see for yourself as your career slowly progress?
It's a good question. I do think about it a lot, obviously. And if you ask me today, I would say that I probably share the same sentiment as Sean Baker has. As like a general principle about me, I tend to be a little bit non-conformative. I don't, when I can, I think everybody's conformative in some sense. But I think that particularly when it comes to art, I actually like kind of raise some major objections to the need to follow a mold for art. I think that tends to be a reductive attitude of what art is and what its like responsibility is in society. That to me, art is really about, and I grew up Christian, and so like I have this kind of idea of like going after the lost sheep, right? And I think that art has this kind of responsibility, especially as we kind of move into like a post-religious society, that art has the responsibility then to go after the voices that are under-championed. And to do that, you have to, by nature, leave the herd. You cannot stay in the gooey center of what is socially acceptable. You have to push some boundaries and say, I'm going to make something that really may not be well received, but there might be one person whose life could be changed by it, or who all of a sudden can feel like they are allowed to exist, or that can champion a social cause that is not, spoken enough about. And so for that reason, like I just don't think that the appeal of moving into mainstream aligns with what I care about artistically. And so therefore I suspect that I will always kind of err on the side of independent filmmaking, as much as I, like anybody, would probably like the vanity of moving into something that makes your parents say, wow, I'm so proud of you, like.
I mean, you've had your moment though. You've sold a TV show to a certain company.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. That's true. So when we made my first film, it was a film, but Simmer, we sold it to HBO, but like the indie film distribution world is a bit of a black box. And it's not like one day I picked up the phone and called HBO and said, hey, I think you guys would really like this. You should look at it. And then they're like, great, we'll pay you. It really was like this chain of events that you sell to a distributor, and that distributor is going to put together a package of films. And they're going to, my film was probably in some package that was urban thriller. That was sort of like the package. And they went to HBO because HBO said, we have a quota, probably. We need to buy, we need 70 properties on our platform this year that are going to be urban thrillers. And we probably were just one of them.
Yeah.
And so like, while I did sell a film to HBO, and I'm very grateful. I think that it's very rare that a budget, we made the film for $75,000. I think it's very rare for a film of that size to find a home on a platform like that. And so for all those reasons, that's great. But like, that didn't do anything for my career, really. Like, it wasn't like we didn't make like a profit from it. We basically barely recouped on the film as a consequence of that sale. And there was no phone calls after that, which is fine. Like, I don't think I was expecting that. Well, maybe I was prior to kind of going through the experience and learning how the real world is, but that was a delusion. And so, like, I just think that there's a world where you can make it outside. Not only I think you kind of have to make it outside of that system first, unless you're one of like a very select few, very fortunate writers, directors, producers who kind of get adopted into that world right away. But I think otherwise, any other filmmaker, it's like you're going to be operating independently for a while before anybody.
Was one of us right after Summer? Was there like a brief? Also, there was an arresting period. There was like Summer, then you went off to HBO Max, and then you went off to make One of Us.
Yeah, it was about 2 years after we had first after we sold to HBO that I then had kind of greenlit One of Us, and in 2023 we went into production on it. So it's been a number of years since something has been released, but there was always kind of there's always sort of progress being made along that journey.
That's
not as fast as I'd like.
Very interesting to hear, because we do have a lot of like young filmmakers and young creatives within the industry that watch the show.
Yeah.
So it's always good to get like somewhat of a reality check of like, just because you sold something doesn't essentially mean that
You've made it.
You kind of made it, or that this is like, okay, you're in the horses and you're going straight to like the promised land.
Yeah.
Or whatnot. So it would be interesting just to hear like, after you sold it, like, what was the steps for you when it came to making One of Us? Was it like, did you ever like use it as like a bargaining chip of like, I've just sold this to HBO Max, would you be able to fund me for my feature film?
That's a really good question. And I think that that's the thing that like any independent filmmaker or aspiring filmmaker should understand is you've got to go make the first feature. You have to do that. Like nothing is, and frankly, very rarely is something going to come from a short film. in today's age, and
Yeah, it's getting, because even when I went to Berlin, they were speaking about short films, and like it seemed like people don't watch short films as much as they used to. It's no longer like a bargain chip to get a feature film nowadays. Is what I've been hearing.
And it's
anyway.
weird as well because a lot of people use YouTube as the platform
Right.
for shorts anyway.
Right.
Like you don't get shorts having their own platform in big major film festivals like they used to.
Yeah.
No, yeah, and it used to be something that was a pipeline. There used to be more of a precedent that if you had a short film that premiered at Berlin or TIFF or Sundance or whatever, then you actually might get picked up by somebody and say, hey, we would like you to now go and write out the feature-length version of that film. Like, the chances of that happening today are near zero.
Yeah.
So they're so low that it would be irresponsible to encourage filmmakers to follow that path. Like, it will happen sometimes. And I have friends who have short films that have premiered at the biggest festivals.
Yeah.
And I bet you if you talk to them, they would say, in an honest conversation, they'd say a lot less happened from that than they thought would. Again, there's a crunching down in the festivals, and it's kind of going towards where the dollars are. So I think you have to make the feature film. And then
Is the feature film just made of like getting like funding from like different platforms? Obviously in the UK we have BFI, so like you saying like getting funding from those type of places or getting private investors, like that scope of thing.
For your first one, you've just got to, like, I would say, beg, borrow, steal. Maybe don't steal, but like the beg, borrow part for sure.
Yeah,
like,
of course.
And I would just also be very conscious of the fact that just write the film you can make. Go and make the thing that is going to be £50,000 or £100,000. Like, just table. If there's a script that you have that is just like totally revolutionary, but it's a £50 million film, like, just table it. You'll maybe get there someday. But for now, you've got to have a calling card, a bargaining chip. You have to have something, because I had a sales agent who explained this really well to me and kind of burst my bubble a little bit, but he was right. He said, you're not going to get any phone calls from this first film, but you are going to be able to use it as a calling card to make your next one. And that was true. Like, when we went out to go casting, or when we went out to go and raise funds from some of these government institutions, and they say, who are you? Have you done anything? You've got something that you can point to and say, I'm not a novice at this. It's my second rodeo, but it's not my first one.
Yeah.
And that can be enough to just kind of get that conversation moving, where it's like, okay, we can make a film with this person. They know how to finish it. They know how to sell it. And really, when you get into indie film and you're talking to money, or you're talking to actors, that's their biggest concern. It's not getting involved in an independent film. It's getting involved in an independent film that is never going to see the light of day.
Yeah.
That's the risk.
Yeah.
But going and acting in a movie, even if it's not going to have a big budget, or even if it's not going to have like some massive rollout or whatever, that doesn't bother them. They just want the reality of, is the film going to get made, and is it going to be released someday? And if you've made one film and successfully done those things, it makes the risk way lower in their mind.
Yeah.
So it does offer that, I think, that you can go to make your second film.
Okay, that's interesting.
I think I wanted to jump on the facts about writing. So like one of the big things that, because I'm trying to understand writing a bit more from the behind the scenes. And so with My Father's Shadow, we had Wale Davis talk about how that started off as a letter. I know that some people start at the end, some people start at the beginning. How do you build your writing process?
Okay, this is a good question, because one of us did not follow the formula that I kind of usually follow when I'm writing something, for better or worse. I don't know yet if it was for better or worse.
We will say it's for better.
well, let's hold on, because maybe you see another one of my films and you'll be like, no, actually one of us sucked and this one's much better. But I was immersing myself a lot in Carl Jung, who is like a philosopher.
That is sociologist. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The world is a play. This makes
the world is a play. It's starting to
Yeah.
come together. So he talks a lot about really like letting the subconscious do the speaking in art. And so much of writing One of Us was an autonomous experience. It was, I had a very strong, detailed framework for what I knew. I knew that it was going to be this kind of theatrical thing. I knew it was going to be very melodramatic and heightened emotions and whatever. But the actual dialogue itself, that was very like elusive and like loose to me, and I didn't have a very strong vision for what that was going to be. I knew the beginning and the end of, and like sort of the gist of the journey of that I was going to go on, but the actual writing itself was very freeform, and it was very tapping into some wells that I don't even know if I could go back to be honest, but tapping into wells and letting that language come out as naturally and as freely, and then having like, you know, a revision process that was pretty rigorous.
I mean, I think that's really impressive, because Shakespearean English is not the most easiest thing to translate, let alone write.
Yeah.
No, that's true. But I guess what I would say is that, like, and maybe this was just me, I was in the mental state. When I started writing One of Us, now we're really gonna get to know me, you guys. When I started writing One of Us, it wasn't long after my mom died, and then my second son died. And so I was and remain in a very dark place.
Which is why death was always.
Which is why death was such an important part of the falling down of that kind of facade, or the veneers that were on life. And in that state, I felt very close to my subconscious. I felt very close to the self, and was not blinded by the ego as much. And it felt much more natural to tap into, like what Jung calls primordial images or archetypes. These are things that, like, they're just ingrained in us. They're these lore, these stories that we, as all of humanity, shares them, but they're deeply suppressed in us. And I just felt very raw. Like, it was like literally the mask had been blown off my face, and I was just standing there in like the galing wind, and it was like the only thing that could come out was just this language that was just strictly poetic.
And I think also that might be like due to the Christian upbringing.
Yes.
You know, when you have like King James version of the
Absolutely.
Bible, it comes like second nature.
Yeah, that's just all kicking around in there. And it was so exposed all of a sudden through these, you know, these traumatic experiences, where it literally was like, if you could just hear what was going on in my head at the time, it's pretty much what's on screen, is just this brutal awakening, this terrifying fear of realizing that our parents aren't perfect, and realizing that we're somewhat damned in that implication, that like, well, who are we going to be to our children? And just being so brutally honest about that. Like you said, it was a combination of Shakespeare and King James version of the Bible and Carl Jung, all kind of stewing at that time in me, and trying to make any rational sense of what that meant.
For sure. And you can definitely check out One of Us premiering at Manchester Film Festival. That's end of this month.
End of this month.
Yeah,
End of
it's
this
coming right
month.
up.
Exciting.
Are you guys coming?
We're gonna try.
Oh,
We're gonna
my
try.
gosh. I've got tickets for you.
Oh,
What?
I've got tickets.
Okay, well,
You gotta try a little harder.
I guess we're there.
I'm there.
I would love it if you guys were there. I think that'd be very fun.
Yeah, we did speak about going down there. That's because I just came from Berlin. I was like, I'll see how it goes. How this
Yeah,
month
yeah.
goes.
Okay, well, we
But I
should
know
talk.
Mads definitely wants to go, so I'm like, okay. I'll
Yeah,
see if
no,
we
I
can try
love
and come down.
Manchester anyway, so
Really?
Yeah.
I've never been to Manchester.
it's just bring a coat.
Yeah, Manchester's great. Well, I always hear Manchester's like London, but a little bit more condensed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is a lot more better.
But a lot more rainier.
yeah.
Really?
That's why
Okay.
you have to bring a
You gotta
coat.
bring
yeah.
a coat.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's a good tip. I gotta
Definitely,
pack the
definitely.
coat.
Definitely. But Stefan, thank you so much for joining us. I got your host of the most Young Man Junes in the building, and we also got Mazzabelli as well. Until next week. Peace.
Bye.
Thank you.